All right, in today's video, we'll be going over how you can use the MySQL General Log to help debug your queries. So the General Log is useful because when you're using an ORM, sometimes you don't always know exactly what the query is that the ORM is producing. So you can use the General Log to see exactly what was queried against MySQL. So as an example, if I do select star from teams, I get this output here, and we know that this was a query I ran. But behind the scenes, MySQL hasn't tracked anywhere that I've ran that query. So instead, what we need to do is turn on the general log, and then we can see what exactly MySQL is tracking. So there's two ways you can turn on the general log. One is via a query that we'll do right now, and the second is via the configuration file, which we'll do after. So to turn it on via a query, you're going to do set global general log equals 1, which just means on. So I'll run that. All right, and then the second thing we need to do is tell the general log where to output to. So by default, it'll go to a log file, but instead we're going to write to a table. So we're going to do set global log output equals table. And this will tell MySQL to output the general log to the table. Great. Now when we run a query, run this select star from teams, we can actually query the general log. So we can do select star from MySQL.general log. And now you can see that at this time, from this user on which host, using which thread and which server, and if it was a query or not, we can see what was ran. So we can see that we ran select star from teams, and we ran select star from MySQL General Log, and then show full tables from MySQL, which was probably Table Plus doing that for us behind the scenes. So now if you take it further, you can do select star from, actually let's just do select ID from teams where ID equals 1. Pretty obvious, right? So we get 1, but then in the general log, we can see if we order by event time descending, we have select ID from teams where ID equals 1. Now, where the general log comes in handy, especially for me when you're debugging, is with the ORM query output. So in your ORM, you might do something like select where ID equals question mark, and then you bind question mark equals 1 with the ORM. But usually when you debug with the ORM, the query, you only see this portion, and you don't always see the full query as it goes around on MySQL, where the general log will always show you the full query. The one thing to note with the general log is that if you're not debugging something, you probably want to have it off, or if you have it on in production, you probably only want it on for a short time because it will take up a lot of data as it logs every single query performed against your server. Okay, so that is how you turn the general log on via the query. Again, to turn it off, you just flip this 1 to a 0 and you turn it off. And then going forward, I can execute this query 10 times, but we will not add any more queries to the general log here. If you did want to clear the general log, you can do truncate table MySQL.general log, that, and then select from, and now we've truncated the table. All right, so let's move on to setting up the general log via the configuration file. However, I would recommend not doing this approach because it's A, it's harder to turn on and off a configuration file, and B, there's a higher chance that you're going to forget to turn it off after you're done debugging. All right, so what we want to do is hop into the configuration file for your MySQL server. For me, it's located at user local etc my.conf. So I'm going to open that. All right, so in the configuration file, you want to make sure that you're adding the parameter under your server settings, not under the client settings. So the MySQL D is for server. MySQL without the D is just for the client. So in here, we're going to add general log equals 1, and then we're going to log output equals table. So that's all we're going to add to the configuration file. We're going to save that. And then I use DB Engine to run MySQL locally. So I'm going to stop MySQL. Come in table plus, confirm that it's stopped twice. Come back here, restart it. Table plus, refresh, good to go. Now I can select from teams. Got my teams results. And then I can select from the general log. And I can see all the queries that I've ran since I've restarted the server. So if I sort them by time, there's my select from teams and all the other stuff that table plus probably did. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is that you can filter and sort the general log just like you would a normal table. So in our example, if I want to find any query that ends with teams, I could do where argument, which is the name of the query that was ran, is like, and then put a little wildcard and do teams. and then it'll only show me the queries that ended in teams. And then again, if I add a couple more of these queries, we should have 4 or 5, and then we can also order them just like we normally would by event time descending. I think that's the most common use case that I do, is that I always order by the most recent so I can find what I'm looking for. And again, you could also do event time and only select the argument if you don't care about the other columns. All right, so that is how you set up the MySQL General Log. Again, don't forget to turn off the log via the configuration file if you're done with it. So you can come back in here and you can switch this 1 to a 0, save, and restart. Everything's turned off. Come back in, everything's turned back on. Select from team. Actually, we can refresh and then truncate, and then select from teams, and then select from the log, and we'll get teams, log, nothing. All right, so we made sure that we turned it off via the configuration file after. All right, so that's how you can use the MySQL General Log to debug your queries. It's especially useful when you use an ORM that doesn't give you nice debugging functionality, but it can also work on just raw SQL if you want to, just to see what your server's processing. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, there's a text version on my website. I'll have a link in the description below. Please like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter @OwenConti for more content.